Hello and welcome to Wineskins, a program that features the lives of the saints and reflections on the Sunday readings, along with information on a variety of topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Jim Corda. Our program is brought to you through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. Our interview segment today will feature Sister Janet Gardner from Beatitude House. It is part 2 of the 3-part series from Spotlight. We will also get a glimpse into the life and times of St. Kateri Tekakwitha, along with reflections on the readings for this 15th Sunday in Ordinary Time. That and more on Wineskins. To tell us more about family life in the Diocese of Youngstown is Dave Schmidt.
You don't have to look far to see evidence that the Catholic Church is concerned about marriage and family life. In October of 2014, Pope Francis conducted an extraordinary synod on the family. The World Meeting of Families took place in Philadelphia in September of 2015. In October of 2015, our own Bishop Murray of the Diocese of Youngstown went to Rome to participate in the Ordinary Synod on the Family. And on March 19th, the Feast of St. Joseph, Pope Francis issued his post-synodal apostolic exhortation, The Joy of Love. At this time, I wish to make a few comments on the vision of the family found in Pope Francis's apostolic exhortation. First of all, the Pope sees the role of the family as being at the very center of the Christian message. The Pope points out that the Word of God tells us that the family is entrusted to a man, a woman, and their children, so that they may become a communion of persons in the image of the union of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Begetting and raising children, for its part, mirrors God's creative work. That is to say that just as God, in the Holy Trinity, is a communion of persons united in love, the family, rooted in the marriage of a man and a woman, is also a communion of persons united in love. But in the world in which we live, this image of the family is in stark contrast to an extreme individualism, which weakens family bonds and ends up considering each member of the family as an isolated unit. The Pope observes that the tensions created by an overly individualistic culture caught up with possessions and pleasures leads to intolerance and hostility in families. Therefore, the Pope reminds us that the strength of family lies in its capacity to love and to teach how to love. For all a family's problems, it can always grow, beginning with love. The Pope says, "I thank God that many families, which are far from considering themselves perfect, live in love, fulfill their calling, and keep moving forward, even if they fall many times along the way. There is no stereotype of the ideal family, but rather a challenging mosaic made up of many different realities, with all their joys, hopes, and problems." He goes on to say that every family, despite its weaknesses, can become a light in the darkness of the world. The Christian ideal, especially in families, is a love that never gives up. With this in mind, Pope Francis sees a special God-given role for families in the world. God has given the family the job of domesticating the world and helping each person to see fellow human beings as brothers and sisters. An attentive look at the everyday life of today's men and women immediately shows the omnipresent need for a healthy injection of family spirit. One way that families do this is by being what the Pope calls the primary setting for socialization. Since it is where we first learn to relate to others, to listen and share, to be patient and show respect, to help one another and live as one. In the family, we learn closeness, care, and respect for others. We break out of our fatal self-absorption and come to realize that we are living with and alongside others who are worthy of our concern, our kindness, and our affection. There is no social bond without this primary, everyday, almost microscopic aspect of living side by side, crossing paths at different times of the day, being concerned about everything that affects us, helping one another with ordinary little things. Thus the Pope recognizes the family as not just the recipient of the Church's care and concern, but as an active agent of pastoral activity in the church and society. In keeping with this vision of family life, the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown is proud to be offering its annual Faith and Family Festival, which actually takes place today, July 10th, from 11 a.m. until 6 p.m. at Hoover Park across from Walsh University in North Canton. Our featured speaker during this free event will be our own Bishop Murray, who will discuss the Church's vision of family. Also enjoy praise and worship bands, activities for kids and teens, a petting zoo, and affordable food stations. And there will be the opportunities for Eucharistic adoration, confession, plus the closing Mass led by Bishop Murray. Pope Francis describes the Church as a family of families, and your family is important to the overall makeup of that larger family. Please join us today for Wineskins. This is Dave Schmidt.
Saint Kateri Tekakwitha was a virgin and the first Native American to be canonized. To tell us more is Elena Chepke. She is from St. Joseph Church in Austintown.
Kateri is the first North American Indian to be canonized. She was born in New York and died at the age of 24 near Montreal, Canada. Her mother was an Algonquin who had been baptized at Three Rivers, Quebec, but during an Iroquois raid, she was carried off to New York, where she was married to a pagan Mohawk chief. 2 children were born of this marriage, but only Kateri survived. Her parents and her brother died in a smallpox epidemic when Kateri was 4 years old. Her face permanently disfigured, and her eyesight was impaired because of the disease. She was raised by an uncle who at one time had 3 Jesuit missionaries as guests. Kateri received instructions and was baptized on Easter Sunday, 1676. The other Indians were vehemently opposed to Kateri's conversion, that a Jesuit missionary advised her to flee to a settlement near Montreal where she could freely practice her religion. She reached the settlement in 1677, and for the next 3 years, under the guidance of a Jesuit spiritual director and an older woman named Anastasia, Kateri led a life of great austerity and charity. In 1679, she made a vow of virginity, and a year later, she passed to her eternal reward. Her death was the occasion for a great revival of religious fervor among the Christian Indians. She was beatified by Saint Pope John Paul II in 1980 and canonized by Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, October 21, 2012. Kateri is the lily of the Mohawks that was irrigated by the blood of French Jesuit martyrs. Her life is all the more remarkable when one reads the accounts of the martyrdom of those first missionaries. Once stirred to anger, the Indians practiced satanic cruelty on their enemies. Yet God raised up this saintly maiden in the midst of savagery and brutality. Likewise remarkable is the fact that at the age of 23, she was able to make a vow of virginity. A celibate life was not held in high regard among the Indians, and being the only Christian in her lodge, Kateri was subject to constant abuse and insults. Because she refused to work on Sundays, she was branded as lazy, and the Indians made fun of her rosary. When at last she was able to escape to the colony near Montreal, she was able to follow her schedule of prayer and austerity unmolested. Her Jesuit spiritual director wrote about her. Every morning, winter and summer, she was in our church at 4 o'clock. She remained several hours in succession in prayer. If someone asked, "Catherine, do you love the Lord?" "Oh, Father, she would say, and she could say no more. At the moment of her death, she whispered, "Jesus, I love you." This first North American Indian to be raised to the altars of the Church is an outstanding example of perseverance in the faith in the midst of persecution. Her strength came from her close and constant union with God in prayer. She is a model for all those who are rejected by their own or who are persecuted because of their fidelity to the practice of their religion. For Wineskins, I am Elena Chepke.
Welcome Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Sister Janet Gardner from Beatitude House. Sister, we know that there's many different sites of Beatitude House around the northeastern part of Ohio. Tell us specifically where those sites are.
Our first site was, as I mentioned, on Fifth Avenue. That was 4 families. Since then, we have obtained 2 more houses with another 8 families and another house for offices and meeting space for the women. So we've got 12 apartments, transitional housing in Mahoning County. We also have in Warren, for the last 10 years or so, another 13 apartments at the old St. Joseph's Hospital convent that we renovated there. And for about 2 years now, we have transitional housing also at the request of the community of Ashtabula, another 10 apartments there. So that's transitional housing. Women can stay up to 2 years. They usually stay 9 to 14 months. So we work very quickly and intensively with women in transitional housing to help them move to permanent housing. We also have permanent supportive housing. That is housing for women with disabilities, very often mental disabilities, sometimes addiction, drug and alcohol, or maybe one of their children has a disability. In that program, women of low income, again, receive supportive services from us, but they can remain in that program for as long as they want the support. In both of these programs, women come to us and we work with them to create their own goals for their future. It's very client-oriented. We do a lot of motivational interviewing with them in which we are attempting to have them take control of their lives and move forward. We give them the support that they need. We have 28 permanent supportive housing units, 4 of them at St. Brendan's Convent in Youngstown. We also collaborate with the Humility of Mary Housing with 4 units at Emmanuel Care Center in Girard. And just this summer opened a new program with the YWCA in Warren, another 12 apartments of permanent supportive housing. The Y runs the program. We offer the case management, support services, life skills, budgeting, and connect them with the local resources in Warren. So that's our housing program.
You also have, you had mentioned specific programs that you do. Tell us one of those stories about the programs.
It's really interesting. When I first came to Beatitude House a little over a year ago, in the transitional housing, we work with the community to fully furnish our 63 apartments. So we're getting donations with furniture, household items, and so on. One family came to the Youngstown site. The woman with her 4 children, 24-year-old woman, we showed her the apartment that she was to get, and her children were so excited about what they were seeing there. Her little 4-year-old boy began to run around the apartment. And of course, we try to make it welcoming. Besides furnishing it and stocking the refrigerator and the pantry and so on, we try to do a little extra. On each of the children's beds, we had a teddy bear or another stuffed animal. Well, this 4-year-old ran to the door of what was to be his bedroom. And he looked in there so excited, and I was so happy that he noticed the teddy bear. He turned around to his mother and he said, "I have a bed. I have a real bed." Most of our women are coming from great poverty. Many of them have been house hopping from family to friends, staying a few weeks here, a month there, mostly on the floor. This child had never had a bed of his own. They were coming to Beatitude House with next to nothing and receiving something that dignified their lives. It was moving to me to see that. Other women have given testimonies of just the help that they can receive in the few months that they're with us in transitional housing to have a new sense of themselves. At our last wine taste dinner, one of the women had lived in Massachusetts. She had her own house, she had a career, she met a man that was to be her dream, She came here to Youngstown with him and found herself in a situation of terrible domestic violence. She lost her self-esteem. She lost any sense of herself. She had lost contact with her family, came to Beatitude House, and in her presentation at our wine taste was a self-confident woman who had regained a sense of self-respect and particularly was happy with herself because her child could believe in her again. That's just one of the stories. She's back in school again. She's going on for her career.
We're going to talk a little bit more about some of those specific stories in a moment, but we're going to take a break. And when we do come back, I think we'd like to wrestle with that whole issue of how do people find themselves and why do they find themselves in this situation of being homeless or disadvantaged and in this terrible cycle of poverty. For more information on that topic and other related issues, and to listen to Wineskins, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doi.org. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I am Marino.
Je suis Marino.
I am Marino.
I believe that we are all connected to each other, and that is the gift of compassion that unites us and makes us one. It doesn't matter what language, culture, or tradition we come from. We can share compassion wherever we are.
Marino, an American Catholic organization of priests and brothers, has been reaching out to those in need for nearly 100 years in 26 countries throughout the world. Marino dedicates 86 cents of every dollar donated to their programs, and with your help, they can do more. Missioners, workers, volunteers, supporters, we are all Marino.
I am Marino.
Yo soy Marino.
I'm Father Mike, and I am Marino.
I am Marino.
I am Marino.
I am Marino.
I am Marino. I am Marino.
I am Marino.
Pope Francis reminds consecrated persons that the first thing for a disciple is to be with the Master, to listen to him and to learn from him. If the warmth of God, his love, his tenderness is not in our hearts, then how can we, who are poor sinners, warm the hearts of others? The more the mission calls you to go out to the margins of existence, says Pope Francis, let your heart be more closely united to Christ's heart, full of mercy and love. When reflecting on this world of distrust, discouragement, and depression, Pope Francis looks to consecrated persons to introduce belief in the possibility of true happiness, in the feasibility of hope that does not depend solely on talent, superiority, or knowledge, but on God. All are given the possibility of encountering Him, if only they seek Him with a sincere heart.
By the time we can walk, each of us yearns for the joy that comes from being able to do for ourselves. Church World Service believes that being self-reliant is a joy everyone should share. So around the block or around the world, share the joy. Church World Service.
Our song today is from the CD entitled Window to Peace. It is by Jerry Jalipo on piano and Denise LaGiglia on flute. Now I will share some thoughts on our scriptures for this 15th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Who is my neighbor? That man in today's gospel who posed that question had a problem. He wanted to take the Bible seriously. He wanted to inherit eternal life, the passage said. So he most likely wanted to go to heaven. So Jesus reminded him that the path to that goal was to love God with his whole heart and his neighbor as himself. Apparently, he had no problem about loving God, but the part about loving neighbor was a bit disturbing. Who is my neighbor? The man asked. This law was given to the Jews, so obviously it referred to all of them. But according to the logic of the man who asked the question, this commandment could not possibly apply to all Jews. Some of them were simply not worth loving. Take Zacchaeus, for example. He was a betrayer of his own people, collecting taxes for the Romans. And what about prostitutes? They were the blight of society. Honorable people would have nothing to do with them. You see the man's dilemma. The man in the gospel was struggling with the question, who is my neighbor? Jesus gave him no answer. He simply told a story, and the point of the story was that the man had to answer his own question. And so do you and I. You see, a neighbor is a choice. First of all, no one can compel anyone to be a neighbor. The man in the story obviously had some people in mind that he didn't like. God himself could not force the man to be a neighbor if he was unwilling to do so. I heard about two men who lived next door to each other. Their houses were no more than 30 feet apart. In a geographical sense, they were neighbors, but these two had never spoken a word to each other. Circumstances in life put them in proximity to each other, but they chose not to be a neighbor to one another. On the other hand, no one can prevent a person from being a neighbor if they choose to be. The Samaritan in our gospel story was a neighbor for one reason and one reason only. He made up his mind to do so and didn't let anything stand in his way. Fear might have stopped him. He could have told himself that he was too busy to help. Stinginess might have stopped him. So why would anyone want to get involved? Ultimately, the Samaritan refused to use any of those excuses and chose to get involved and made up his mind to be a neighbor. He would not let anything stand in his way. That's the nice thing about being a neighbor. When we choose to do it, no one or nothing can stand in our way. I remember hearing about a lawyer who worked in a high-rise tower in New York City. At the front entrance was a newsstand where he would make small purchases each morning. The owner was an ill-tempered, impatient man. He would say things to his customers like, "Well, make up your mind. I don't have all day." Occasionally he would say, "Is that the smallest bill you've got? I'm not running a bank here, you know." One day a friend asked the lawyer if that man was always so rude, and he said, yes, he was. "Then why are you so nice to him all the time?" the man asked the lawyer. The lawyer replied, "I made up my mind a long time ago not to let him decide how I was going to act." I remember a little poem that goes like this. He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in. Who is my neighbor? That is up to you and me. If you are unwilling to be a neighbor, not even God himself can make you do it. But if you choose to be a neighbor, no one can stop you. The choice is yours. For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Corda. Our faith calls us to see all people as our neighbors, as near and dear to us as they are to God himself. Remember, God is the Father of us all. Who needs your compassion or presence today? Have you passed by on the opposite side? and not attend to the needs of your neighbor? Wineskins is made possible by the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. Wineskins is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Corda, thanking you for being with us. Have a blessed Sunday, and may God be with you.